Alrighty guys, let's start on our semester exam review. Question number 1. The number line below shows various locations on Hillsborough Avenue in terms of blocks from Florida Street, which means Florida is our 0. So how many blocks would you walk to get from the library to McDonald's? Well, if I start at the library, I go from the library to Florida Street. How far did I go? I went 4 blocks. And then from Florida Street to McDonald's, I went 5 blocks. So 4 plus 5 is a total of 9 blocks. Okay. Number 2, the weather forecast in Boston last night was for a temperature to drop 3 degrees each hour. If the temperature was at 7 degrees at 8, what was the temperature at midnight? Well, for this one, I'm going to do a vertical number line. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to make my vertical number line. And I'm going to start it at 7 degrees. Okay? And then I'm going to go from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, and 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So this was 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, and 11 to 12. And each jump, it went down 3 degrees. So from 8 to 9, it dropped from 7 to 4 degrees. From 9 to 10, it went from 4 to 1. And from 11 to, or from 10 to 11, it went from 1 to -2. And from 11 to midnight, it dropped another 3, and it went from 2 to -5. So my answer is C. Okay. Number 3. The temperature in Grantham, New Hampshire at 2:30 was 35 degrees. By 11:30, the temperature was -18. What was the change in temperature? Well, that's another change in temperature, so I'm going to do another vertical number line. I'm going to do this one over here. Okay. So I'm going to start at 35. And I know I have to end at -18 degrees. And I'm going to pass 0 in the middle. Okay? So if I go from 35 to 0, I dropped 35 degrees. And then when I go from 0 to -18, I've dropped another 18 degrees. So I know my signs are the same, so I'm going to add them together. So 35 plus 18, my temperature change was 53 degrees. Okay? 53 degree drop in temperature. Okay, and there's my answer for that. Okay? All right, find the difference in simplest form. Okay, well, difference, that means I'm subtracting. And in order to subtract, I know I have to have common denominators, correct? So I want to go ahead and convert these to fractions greater than 1. So I'm going to say 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So I have 7/4 minus, well, 8 times 2 is 16, plus 1 is 17. Okay, but I still can't do anything because I don't have a common denominator here. So I know my common denominator between 4 and 8 is going to be 8. So I need to multiply this by 2 and this by 2. So I wind up with 14/8 minus 17/8. And that's going to give me, well, I know that this number is larger than this number. So this is really positive 14 plus a negative 17, which means I'm going to subtract the absolute value. So 17 minus 14 is 3. 3/8. But this one is farther away from 0, so I passed 0 to go on my 17, so this is negative 3/8. So my answer for this one is A. Okay. Number 5, find the quotients of 1 4/5 and 2 1/4. I don't have enough room to write on here, so I'm going to do this on a piece of paper. So number 5, I have negative 1 4/5, and the quotient tells me I'm going to divide. So this is divided by 2 1/4. Okay, well, I know I can't divide fractions if they are in mixed fraction form, so I need to go ahead and convert these to fractions greater than 1. So 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is 9. So this is 9/5, and it's a negative. Divided by 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. 9/4. Now remember, how do I divide by a fraction? Remember, I have to keep, change, flip. I keep this, so it's negative 9/5. I change this, keep, change, flip. Change this to multiplication, and I flip this. Okay? Now the one thing I know I can do here is I know that 9 goes into 9 one time, so I can cross cancel those out. So now I'm left with 1 times 4 is 4, and 5 times 1 is 5, and this was a negative times a positive, so my answer has to be negative. So my answer for this one is negative 4/5. Okay? Make sure if you're doing your work on a separate paper, you're saving that paper for me so I can see it. Okay? All right, number 6. Frank practiced basketball on 4 different days last week for 1 3/4 hours each time. How many hours did he practice last week? Okay, I'm going to do this one on a piece of paper too. So number 6. So I know he practiced 4 days for an hour and 3/4 each, and that's going to give me my total. Okay. So, like I said, when we're multiplying fractions, we can't do it when they're in improper form. So I need to change this to 4 times 1 times 4 is 4, plus 3 is 7. 7/4. So this is really 4 over 1 times 7/4. Again, I can cross cancel here. 4 goes into 4 one time on both of them. So when I multiply across, I get 7 over 1. So this is, he practiced for 7 hours. Okay. All right, let's look at number 7. Greg paid the bowling alley for an afternoon of bowling. He paid $7.50 for shoe rental and $2.25 per game bowled. Okay, so I'm going to move this out of the way so I can do it on my paper. So number 7, what do I know? He spent $21, so $21 was his total. What else do I know? He paid $7.50 for shoe rental, and he paid $2.25 per game. Okay, so I know when I go bowling, I have my shoe rental, plus my games, and that equals my total. Okay? And to find my amount of my games, I have my number times my per game price, right? So in this one, my shoe rental was $7.50 plus, we don't know the number of games, but we do know what he paid per game. So he paid $2.25 times, we're going to use G for games, okay, and that total gave me $21. Okay, so then I'm just going to solve this like a regular equation. So I have to get, where's my pen? I have to get this term by itself. So in order to get this term by itself, I have to get rid of this 750. So this is positive 750. So I need to subtract 750 from this side. If I subtract 750 from this side of the equation, I have to subtract 750 from this side of the equation. Okay? So if I have $21 minus 750, I wind up with $13.50 over here. So I know that he spent $13.50 on the total number of games that he bowled. If he paid $2.25 per game, now I have to get the G by itself. Okay, so this is $2.25 times G. So I have to divide both sides by $2.25. If I divide this side by $2.25, I have to divide this side by $2.25. So if I divide by $2.25, I wind up with G equals 6. Okay? So how many games did Greg bowl? He bowled 6 games. Okay. You guys notice how nice and organized I'm keeping my paper? I know this is problem number 5, number 6, number 7. When you do it all over the place, it's really hard to keep track of what's going on. All right, number 8 wants us to simplify. I'm going to keep doing this on notebook paper because I'm running out of room on the paper. So I have negative 2 2/5 plus 3 2/3 minus 1 3/5. Okay, well, I know I don't have common denominators on all of them, but I do have 2 that have common denominators, so I'm going to use the commutative property, and I'm going to rearrange things. So I'm going to make this 2 2/5 minus 1 3/5 plus 3 2/3. So I know if I go to add these 2 together, so I'm going to move this down here. So I have negative 2 1/5, and I'm going to take another 1 3/5. When I combine those, when I add those 2 together, 2/5 plus 3/5 is 5/5, and negative 2 plus negative 1 is negative 3. So I have negative 3 5/5, which is actually equal to 4, right? Because 5/5 is 1. So now this problem is 4 plus 3 2/3. So I just have to add my whole numbers, so I have 7 2/3. Okay? So 7 2/3 is my answer for number 8. 7 2/3. Okay? Number 9 is to write 0.7777777777 as a fraction. Well, sometimes when we've got a repeating decimal, it's harder to do. So I know it's not 7/10 because that would be 0.7 stopping. So the next closest one would be 7/9. So I'm going to check that one. 7 divided by 9. And when I plug that into my calculator, I get 0.7777777777. So that's going to be it right there. because it's just going to be a little bit less than my 7/10. So that's how we came up with that one. Sometimes you just have to plug it into the calculator. Okay? All right. Number 10. Write 8/11 as a decimal. I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. 8/11 as a decimal. Well, plug that into the calculator. Cowboy up. 8 goes in first. 8 divided by 11. And I get 0.7272727272. So that becomes 0.72. And my repeater bar goes over the 7 and the 2 because that's what's repeating. Okay? All right, take a look at number 11. What did Daxton do wrong? Convert 2/3 to a decimal. Okay, well, I can look at his answer here, and this is 1.5. That's more than 1 whole. That's 1.5. 2/3 is not 1.5, so I know he did something wrong. Let me think about it. Oh, wait. Cowboy up. That means it should have been the horse stays at the hitching post and the cowboy goes inside. Right? So this should have been 3 goes into 20 6 times 18, 2, 0. So this should have been 0.6. Okay? So he divided the denominator by the numerator. Instead of the other way around. Okay. All right, number 12. Which expression is equal to 3/4 times the quantity 2x minus 8? Well, I'm going to write this one out. So this is number 12. So I have 3/4 times 2x minus 8. Okay, so I have to use distributive property. So I have to give this 3/4 there and give the 3/4 there. Okay, well, 3/4 times 2x, that's going to be 6/4. 6/4 x minus, well, and this is 3/4 times 8/1, and I know that I can cross cancel here, and so this becomes 3 times 2 is 6. So this is 6/4 x minus 3 times 2 is 6. But 6/4 is an improper fraction. Okay, so 6/4 is an improper fraction, so I need to reduce this. And I know I can reduce this by dividing both by 2. So this becomes 3/2 of x minus 6. Okay, so there's my answer for that one. 3/2 of x minus 6. So for number 12, my answer is A. Okay. Number 13. Oh, time for another piece of paper. I'm out of room. All right. Number 13. Number 13 is 0.2 times the quantity 1.4 minus 3x plus 1.3x minus 2.9. That looks a lot harder than it actually is. So I'm going to I got to distribute that 0.2 to everything in here. Okay? So when I take my calculator and I say 0.2 times 1.4, I get 0.28. So this is 0.28 plus, I'm going to change this to plus a negative. I like to deal with addition whenever I can. So 0.2 times negative 3. So 0.2 times negative 3 gives me 0.6x plus 1.3x minus 2.9. All right, so let me combine all of my like terms. So I have 0.28 minus 2.9 minus 0.6x plus 1.3x. Okay, so I say 0.28 minus 2.9, and that gives me negative 2.62. Okay, and this is negative 0.6 plus 1.3, and that equals 0.7. And because this one has a greater absolute value, it's going to be plus 0.7. So there's my answer. Okay, so this one is negative 2.62, negative 2.62 plus 0.7x. Or you could write it the other way around, and you could write 0.7x minus 2.62. Either answer is correct. All right, number 14. I'm going to keep doing this on notebook paper because it's a lot. So I have 1/2 times the quantity, 5x minus 6, minus 1/3 times the quantity, 9x minus 15 plus 1. Okay? Well, I know that multiplying by 1/2 is the same as dividing by 2. So when I distribute my 1/2, I can say in my head, 5 divided by 2 is what? Well, that's 2.5, or 2.5. So let's do 2.5x, and half of 6, that's going to be minus 3. Okay? And 3 multiplying by 1/3 is the same as dividing by 3. So this is going to be minus 1/3 of 9x is 3x. Okay? And 1/3 of 15 is 5, and they're both negative, so this becomes positive 5 plus 1. So now I'm going to rearrange. So now I have 2.5x minus 3x minus 3 plus 5 plus 1. Well, 2.5x minus 3x is 1/2x. Okay? And this is negative 3 plus 5 is 2 plus 1 is 3. Plus 3. So 1/2x plus 3. Oh, 2.5 minus 3, that's negative 1/2x. Got to be careful and watch those signs. So now when I go back to my answer choices, negative 1/2 plus 3. There it is, C. Negative 1/2x plus 3. Got to watch those signs. All right, number 15 is 3/4 A minus 9/20. Okay, and they want me to factor this completely. Well, to factor it, I have to find out what my common factors are between 3 and 9 and my common factors between 1 and 4. So let's start with 3 and 9. I have 3. My factors of 3 are 1 and 3. 9, my factors are 1 and 9 and 3 and 3. So for 4 and 20, I have 1 and 4, 2 and 2. For 20, I have 1, 20, 2, and 10, 4, and 5. So I need to come in here and look at what my common factors are between 3 and 9. Well, that's obviously going to be 3. And my common factors between, my greatest common factor between 4 and 20 is going to be 4. So I have to pull those out. So this becomes 3 over 4 times A. Okay, I've got this time minus, I'm going to pull the 3/4 out. So if I pull 3/4 out, what do I have to multiply 3/4 times to get 9/20? Well, I have the 3 and the 5. So this is 3/5. Okay, so when I go to factor it, I have to pull these two out. I have to pull those out. So then I have 3/4 times the quantity. I have left inside, I have A minus 3/5. Okay, so let's go back to our answer choices. 3/4 times A minus 3/5. That's going to be D. All right, number 16. I have 2.4 C plus 6. And I need to completely factor that out. Well, I know, because this is an even number and this is an even number, that I can pull 2 out. So let's just start with that and see what happens. If I pull out 2, so if I take 2.4 and divide it by 2, I wind up with 1.2. So this becomes 2 times 1.2 times C plus 2 times 3. Okay, so I'm going to pull the 2 out of both of them. So when I pull out the 2, I'm left with 1.2 C plus 3. Okay, 2 times 1.2 C, 2 times the quantity, 1.2 C plus 3. Okay, so that's what I've got written there. Okay, number 17. I'm going to do number 17 here on the page. I have 1/2 x plus 6 equals 11. So I have to get this term by itself. In order to do that, I have to subtract 6 from this side and subtract 6 from this side. So I wind up with 1/2 of x equals 11 minus 6 is 5. So if 1/2 of x is 5, so that's x divided by 2 is 5. How do I undo division? I have to multiply. Okay, so I have to multiply by the reciprocal over here because I want this to equal 1. So 2 times 1 and 1 times 2 is 1. If I multiply this side by 2, I have to multiply this side by 2. And I wind up with x equals 10. Okay. Number 18. Which steps would solve 5 minus x equals -3? Okay. So the first thing I'm going to have to do, I'm actually going to do this problem. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go 5 minus x equals negative 3. So I'm going to solve the problem. The first thing I have to do is get this by itself. So I have to subtract 5 from both sides. And I wind up, those cancel. I wind up with negative x equals negative 8. Okay? And then if this is really a negative 1, so if I divide both sides by negative 1, I wind up, those cancel out as x, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. That equals x equals 8. Okay, so now I'm going to come back up. First thing we did was subtract 5, so it can't be b and it can't be a. Alright, so I subtracted 5 from both sides of the equation. Bam. Then subtract x. No, because I didn't subtract x. That wouldn't have made any sense. So C is what we did. Sometimes it just helps just to work it out, and then you can go from there. Alrighty? Alright, let's do number 19. Which steps would solve 1/5 x plus 2? Alright, well, what's the first thing I know I'm going to have to do? If I have 1/5 x plus 2 equals 17, I've got to get, how am I going to get this by itself? First thing I have to do is subtract 2. Subtract 2. So I wind up with 1/5 x equals 15. So the first thing I have to do is subtract 2 from both sides. So I know it's not a, and I know it's not b. Okay? Then, again, 1/5 x is the same as x divided by 5. So how do I undo division? I multiply. So if I'm dividing by 5, then I need to multiply by 5 to undo it. So I'm going to multiply by 5, multiply by 5. Okay? So I subtracted 2 from both sides, and then I multiply both sides of the equation by 5. So D is my answer for that one. Okay? Number 20. I'm going to go back to the piece of paper for number 20. So I'm looking over here for number 20. Oops. There we go. All right. So we have 5x minus 6 equals 3x plus 8. So when they give you a problem like this that asks you what's another way to express the equation, the thing to do is actually just do the equation and then go back and see what your answer choices are. So for this one, this side has my variable with the largest coefficient, so I'm going to move my variables over to this side and my constants over to this side. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 3x from this side and subtract 3x from this side. Okay? Those cancel, so now I'm left with 2x minus 6 equals 8. Okay? The other thing I can do, now I can add 6 to both sides. And so this gives me 2x equals 14. Then I divide both sides by 2, and I'm left with x equals 7. So let's go back and look at our answer choices for number 20. Okay, let's look at our answer choices. 2x equals 2. Nope. 2x minus 6 equals 8. I got that one there. 6 minus 2x equals 8. Nope, that's not one we had. And 8x minus 6 equals 8. Nope. All right, so this one right here, B, is our answer choice. See? Not that bad. All right, so this was 1 through 20, and I will get the video up for 21 through 34 as quickly as humanly possible, and we will continue on from there.